Chapter 16 deals with respiratory infections. So a couple of vocab words. The main one I want you to know is epiglottis, which is inflammation and swelling of the epiglottis, and that can quickly block the airway. Pharyngitis is inflammation of the pharynx, and sinusitis is inflammation and swelling of the sinus membranes. Now, in our respiratory tract, we have what's known as the mucociliary escalator, and it's a ciliated mucous membrane that lines the lower respiratory tract. And keep in mind that this elevator goes up and out. So when things get trapped, the particles start to move up and they get cleared out of your lungs. Now, another term that you guys may have heard of, may not have, but please know for your test, is croup. And that is a combined inflammation of the larynx, trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles. And that's caused mainly by viruses, and it's characterized by a barking cough and stridor. And stridor is a wheezing or loud breathing that's associated when airways are blocked or narrowed. Another term that you should know is dyspnea, and that is shortness of breath. The common cold is caused by viruses, and there's over 200 types of viruses from 8 different genera that will cause the common cold. Now, they're very infectious. They're spread from one person to the next by interacting personally, respiratory droplets from coughing, sneezing, fomites like cell phones, pacifiers, etc. Again, because they are viruses, antibiotics do not do anything if you have a cold. So antibiotics are not made to treat viral infections. Influenza resembles a common cold, but it's really not. And it can affect your lungs, upper respiratory tract, and it can be very, very uncomfortable. And in some cases, it can be fatal. Now, if you take a look at some of the influenza virus outbreaks, the first one that was noted was in the early 1900s, and it killed millions of people worldwide. And then that popped up, and it was called the swine flu back in the 80s, and that was a mild season, or maybe 3,000 plus deaths. And then it showed up again, H1N1 showed up again in the 2000s and killed 56,000 people in the US alone. So these can become pandemics, and which means worldwide, of course. So two types of influenza viruses out there I'd like you to be aware of. The type A are the ones that commonly cause flu epidemics, and type B, which don't have much of an impact or as big of an impact, but they still cause epidemics out there. So CDC has confirmed that there's 3 times as many deaths when type A is the main strain that is prominent. 2 other things to know about different types of flu viruses. They can have what are known as antigenic drift and shift. And drift is when you have random mutations, and shift is when you have major genetic types of changes. Another type of pathogen that can cause problems in your lungs is Streptococcus pyogenes. And please know it primarily causes strep throat, but it can move to other parts. There's over 40 species. They are a positive cocci. They grow in chains. They can be found in some individuals as their normal microbiota in the upper respiratory tract and even skin. But they can cause a lot of diseases elsewhere in the body, heart, again, meningitis can occur, urinary tract infections, even cavities and that, etc. Now, you will see a buildup in some cases of strep throat, like these white packets of exudate that seems to build up. But the key thing to notice here is the redness that occurs, that little bit of white stuff. In most cases, individuals with strep throat really don't have a cough, but very, very painful throat as a result. Now, strep can also cause scarlet fever, so please know all of this in red. And it actually produces what's called an erythrogenic type of toxin. And what you're going to see as a result of that toxin is a very red area where the infection is. So if we take a look at this child here, you can see there's a red rash. But notice how red the tongue is, and notice like all of this white stuff where the infection is also taking place. But the tongue is swollen, and sometimes this is known as strawberry tongue because it's kind of rough and red. Another thing that streptopyogenes can cause is rheumatic fever. And in this case, we have what are called rheumatogenic M proteins. That's an important thing to know about rheumatic fever. We have those. So what happens is with rheumatic fever is that the host antibodies are going to cause a lot of inflammation of the joints. So you're going to see what almost looks like arthritis in some cases. Nervous system can also become affected, heart and skin. Long-term complications are normally due to the fact that the heart gets affected, and that can affect these individuals for the rest of their lives. Diphtheria is another disease we should be aware of, and the agent that causes that is called Corynebacterium diphtheriae. Please know that. And I'd like you guys to take a look at this. Now again, we do have a diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis vaccine. Important thing with that is that you have to get boosters for this. Now, we don't see a lot of cases of this. However, and that's because of the vaccine. But look at this child's throat, how swollen that is. Now, over here, we have what's called a pseudomembrane. And if you guys notice, it is actually closing off this child's throat. So this can be fatal. So again, when people don't want to vaccinate their children against this, your child could potentially die as a result of this infection. So again, an exudate is a fluid discharge. It's kind of pussy, clear stuff that comes out, and that's due to inflammation. Paroxysm is when you have a violent cough. When you're convalescent, you're feeling better, but you're not completely recovered. And latent infections are those that are present, but you may not have any symptoms yet. So these are things that we have to be aware of, because sometimes the agent that's causing the latent infection can actually activate later on. So pertussis is commonly known as whooping cough. Please note it's caused by Bordetella pertussis. And what this agent does is it can actually paralyze, if you will, the ciliary escalator. So when these individuals then get infected in the first stage, and please know these 3 stages for your test, the cathary stage, that's when the bacteria are rapidly dividing. They're starting to neutralize and get caught up in the ciliary escalator. A lot of mucus forms. Then in the paroxysmal stage, that's when a lot of the coughing takes place. And because these individuals can't move the microbe and mucus up and out, they have to take big whooping gulps of air and then cough, and hence that's the name whooping cough. That's where it came from. So for the convalescent stage, they're getting better, but they're not 100% recovered yet. Now, pertussis has come back again, and if you take a look in around 2010, the numbers start going up. It peaked in about 2012, and the groups most affected, those of us who, like myself, are over 20, didn't seem to have too much of a rise because most of us kept up with boosters, etc. But in younger individuals who may not have gotten the proper booster shots, this has become a problem. Or it could be somewhere around here. Maybe the batch wasn't as good as it was, because it did go down, but then it goes up. So we have to be very careful with this. One thing I do want to mention, though, if you look at these numbers in infants, so those under 1 year old, this still is an issue. And part of that, again, class, is because these kids can't get vaccinated before the age of 1 and get like the full series with boosters, etc. So vaccines do protect our babies, and that's something that I'd like you to keep in mind. TB, tuberculosis, in the lab, we did have a discussion post on this, caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So it does have mycolic acid, and it's considered an acid-fast rod. Please take a screenshot of this slide and upload to the Dropbox. Now, when you get the initial infection, what happens is your immune system will stimulate macrophages to go and engulf the microbe. In some of the cases, however, the bacteria is able to survive inside. Crazy. It's able to survive inside of the macrophages. That's initially. Now you can have two forms latent. In the latent form, what will happen is this granuloma will form, and inside here the bacteria is actually protected. At some point, this can actually activate. The bacteria can actually start to replicate for whatever reason and basically burst out. And that's what happens when you have the active form of tuberculosis. There are multi-drug resistant types. There's over 400,000 of those. And if you do get infected with TB, there's a 52% chance it's going to be multi-drug resistant. There's extreme drug resistance in about 26% of cases of tuberculosis. Now, pneumonia is inflammation of lung tissue, and especially of the alveoli. There's a lot of different microbes that can cause it. And believe it or not, guys, worms can actually cause pneumonia as well. Bacteria and viruses are our main causes of pneumonia. So I'd like you to know that what we call in the common type of bacterial types of pneumonia are caused by Streptococcus pneumoniae. So please know for your test, if I ask you what pneumococcal pneumonia is caused by, tell me Streptococcus pneumoniae. That's what causes it. Another type, walking pneumonia, also known as Mycoplasma pneumonia, please know, is caused by Mycoplasma pneumoniae.